I've known I was trans my whole life, but I didn't come out until I was 11 years old in 2015. When I had to live my life as a girl on the outside, it was very hard for me to make social interactions with people, go out in public, because something always felt off inside of me. Being able to start my transition at 11 was just like so overwhelming and scary, but exciting, and I feel grateful. Say a trans person came out at 8 and they had to wait till they were 18 to start hormone replacement therapy and not even able to get puberty blockers, so their body has fully now gone through puberty. That now makes transitioning 10 times more hard and traumatizing. It's extremely important for trans youth to be able to transition at puberty. I think without that, all of these kids who know who they are deep down inside would never get the opportunity to live their childhood as their truth. And I think that's just horrendous. And I think it's just transgender genocide. If I was not able to transition at the age I was, I would not have made it to 18. I do not think the government should be denying trans healthcare. It's life-saving healthcare. It's needed healthcare. It's necessary healthcare. I truly believe being able to transition as a teen saves lives.
It's also important to point out the number one reason for detransition is because transphobia. And so creating more and unnecessary boundaries for transitioning ultimately does harm our community.
All right, guys, so I stumbled across this absolutely amazing segment from this based neuroscientist by the name of Miss Debra So, who is going to set these transgender activists straight on biological reality. And this is important because you don't see too many scientists who actually have real expertise in this field come out and speak about this because they don't want to get canceled, okay? They don't want to be smeared as hateful or transphobic or whatever, right? So you don't hear them actually speak out, okay? But this neuroscientist doesn't give an F, okay? She is speaking out and she's going to tell the truth to some of these activists about the downsides of this idea that kids can somehow know that they're the opposite sex or gender before they turn 18, right? Before they're even able to consent. And I want you guys to notice the reaction from these activists on the Dr. Phil show as this scientist basically bursts their bubble. She gives them their worst nightmare, which is just a dose of reality, okay? That is a woke person's worst nightmare. Reality. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Dr. So, why do you think young people are being incorrectly diagnosed with gender dysphoria? And should those who are wait to get transitions?
Absolutely. There should be a longer period of time. And most importantly, there needs to be a proper assessment done. I really take issue with this narrative that children quote unquote know their true selves, or they know their gender identity if they believe that they're transgender, or that detransition is purely due to social stigma or due to transphobia. If you actually talk to detransitioners, as I have, you'll hear the reasons as to why they have chosen to detransition, why they have regret about their decisions, in many cases having undergone medicalization. There's so many other issues that these young people are struggling with, whether it is being on the autism spectrum. They have, many of them, if not all I've spoken to, have a history of sexual trauma. They are not comfortable with their sexuality if they are gay. They may have anxiety, depression, and in some cases, as in Ryan's case, if it's a young woman who reaches puberty, is not comfortable in her body, she thinks that because she doesn't like being sexualized by society, that means that she's actually a man, or she's so-called non-binary, even though there are only two genders. Even for young women who don't like having a period, they believe that that means that they're actually a man. And I question, do children actually have the capacity to make lifelong permanent decisions about their bodies? And do they really understand what these interventions involve? I don't think they do. And
yeah. So again, you notice the faces of some of these transgender folks, right? Some of them got tattoos on their face, which again, to me is an indication of, again, there's some issues going on, right? And that's just not for them. Anybody that has a tattoo on their face, if you're getting permanent writings on your face, I got questions, right? I got some questions about what's going on. But what you're seeing here is these facial expressions of people who've never heard reality come from a scientist, because all the scientists are woke, okay? And, again, if you say stuff like this, you can't be a scientist anymore, right? And she's going to go into this furthermore in this video, but I just want to point out, just notice their faces. It's almost like they've never heard it before. Okay, and it's like a shock, and you're gonna see the facial expressions are gonna get even, more like, kind of stunned and surprised as we move on in the video. But the things she's pointing out are things that people on the right and people who are against kids being able to transition have been pointing out for a long time, which is that, a lot of these kids, they have a whole lot of other conditions that could explain why they feel the way they feel outside of, well, them having real gender dysphoria. Okay, a lot of them are experiencing depression, anxiety. Some of them are just uncomfortable with changes that are happening in their body related to puberty. Like she said, a girl may feel uncomfortable getting a period, which could make her think that, hey, I'm actually supposed to be a boy, which is not the case. Okay, but again, that's what happens. That's what happens. And again, it's just refreshing to see an actual scientist come out here and tell the truth, because we don't have enough of this, right? A lot of these scientists have, again, sacrificed their integrity at the woke altar, right? In exchange for not being called, transphobic, so they don't actually follow real science, right? So let's move forward here.
I think we're doing a real disservice to young people, especially with this ideology. We see it coming into education. We see it being glorified in society, with the fact that legitimate experts cannot speak about the science, that legitimate studies cannot be done. Actual science that is correct is being suppressed, is being denied, is being called hateful. And so people are understandably terrified to talk about this. And if you are in the field, whether you're an academic, my reason for leaving academia is because I wasn't willing to stay quiet about this issue. If you do work within, say, academia, if you're a scientist, you cannot produce any research that goes against activist narratives, or they will completely destroy you.
And what do you say to the parents of a child?
Now, before we get into this, I want to say, same thing goes for climate stuff, right? You can't produce any research that goes against the narrative, or again, the activists will destroy you, okay? That's way too much of that going on, again, in science. That's what happened with COVID. That's what happened with the pandemic. You can't say anything that goes against what the activists, right, the Democrat Party, the liberal left, the progressives say, or else they're going to destroy you. They're going to say you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a dingbat, you're Alex Jones type, right? They're going to say you're a science denier, when, again, these people are the ones that actually denying the science, right? They don't actually really believe in real science. They actually care more about the narrative than the science. Happens all the time.
Like Reese, who says, look, at 5 years old, he knew at the core of his soul who he was, and that it was not who he had been assigned at birth. What do you say to someone like that is truly suffering, and goes through the steps in a cautionary fashion?
I think that intervention should be on a one-on-one case. So about the individual patient, it shouldn't be about activism. It shouldn't be about sweeping policy in either direction. But I feel right now, parents especially, they're being emotionally blackmailed with this narrative that unless their child transitions, that child is at a high rate of suicide, which is not true.
Okay, yeah. So key point here, okay? And this is something I talked about a lot. What they're doing is probably one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen, okay, in regards to trying to guilt trip people into going along with this. They basically say, look, if you don't go along with it, then people are going to delete themselves, or I might delete myself, right? This is what they're saying. And they use that as a way to try to get people to go along with it, or else feel guilt anytime any person that's a transgender person gets murdered, or they happen to delete themselves or whatever. They're saying, well, it's your fault. It's your fault because you engaged in transphobia, right? And again, this tactic, again, it is being used, again, to blackmail people, specifically parents, into doing this. Saying, look, you need to go along with it or you might lose your child. Which, again, is not true, right? It's not true. That, there's no evidence to suggest that going through these procedures is actually going to increase the chance of a child, not harming themselves, or it's going to relieve, the feeling or the want to do that. There are deeper issues going on that need to be explored and looked at, and they're not going to be solved by transitioning a child. But again, this is why I can't feel but so bad for certain parents who give into this stuff, who go along with it, because again, a lot of them are going along with it thinking that, okay, well, if I don't go along with it, I'm going to lose my child. I'd rather go along with it than to lose my child. Again, this is why I say that tactic in and of itself is a disgusting tactic, because they don't really have any evidence to back it up. but yet they keep pushing it on people. They push it on parents as a way to get them to go along with the agenda. It's messed up. Like, it really is messed up to think about.
The other thing is social transition is being sold as it's being sold by activists as being completely harmless. So this consists of a child changing their haircut, changing maybe their name and their pronouns, and dressing like the opposite sex. And this is seen as just a way for them to explore it. But the thing is, from a research perspective, social transition, even though it doesn't involve medical transition, is associated with going on to medical intervention, and from there going on, including cross-sex hormones and surgery.
Facts. Again, this is why I'm not down with the social transition. You know, when they say, oh, well, you're a bigot. We're not actually putting kids under the knife. We're not giving them hormones and stuff like that. We're just calling them they, them. And I'm just like, okay, but what does that lead to? What's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to get them on hormone blockers, okay, medications, and then eventually surgery. Social transitioning just makes it easier to do that, right? That's all it does, in my opinion. It just makes it easier. It's a slow ramping up to getting them where you actually want them to go. And this is why, again, even social transitioning for children is not acceptable. You shouldn't be doing that for kids. So, I mean, again, this doctor is on point, and a lot of these people are looking like, oh, they've never heard this before, right? They've never heard this before.
So in a way, it sets a child down this path because it makes it more difficult.
Look at this person's face. Never heard it before. Can't believe it. Right? Can't believe it.
Difficult for the child to say, oh, I made a mistake. It's also very shameful for a child to have to say, I've been making everyone in my life call me this new name and use these new pronouns, and I was actually wrong about that. Children also receive so much attention and praise nowadays for identifying as anything other than their birth sex.
Look at that face. Look at that face. Again, can't believe it. This is the face when you get hit with reality, right? Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Denial. But everything she said is 100% true. She's on point. This is probably the best and most succinct argument against this that I probably ever heard. Okay, it really is. She does an amazing job. She did not hold back at all. She went through every single pro trans and kids talking point, and she just demolished it. Right, demolished every single last one of them.
And we see this with young people. 20% of Generation Z identifies as LGBT plus. So young people are incentivized. I don't believe this is purely due to social acceptance. There's no way that 1 in 5 young people identifies as something other than their birth sex. That's ridiculous to me. So the fact that this is being not only it's being pushed in education. I mean, that's the issue I have, is that it's not an objective approach. It's very much about there's only one right outcome. And if you don't follow that outcome, then you're in trouble.
Okay.
You're big.
I got what you're saying. You think it's a gateway and puts them on the path.
Absolutely.
All right, so I want to jump to this part of the show, okay, where they're talking to this guy, Eli Erlick, about them being transgender, whatever. And, you know, this guy is a big transgender activist. And I want you guys to kind of hear this exchange between him and Dr. Phil, and then listen to this reporter from News Nation who talks about what a doctor is experiencing who's, again, sounding the alarm. She's ringing the alarm on the fact that, hey, we're going too far with these transitions. I want you guys to hear kind of what her experience has been. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I've worked with thousands of trans youth over the years, and many stories are very similar to my own. I personally came out when I was 8. I went on hormones when I was 15, had surgery when I was 17, and have no regrets. There is, frankly, an unprecedented moral panic over trans people right now that's completely unnecessary. Trans people, to put it simply, just want to be left alone.
I can't tell, right? I can't tell because, again, that group is making a lot of noise, right? They're making a whole lot of noise, okay? Again, I can't really tell because they're trying to force everybody to go along with what they want, okay? They don't just want to be left alone.
We want to be supported by our communities, and we really want respect.
Well, is that true? Do trans people want to be just left alone, or are they insisting that everybody stand up and make an affirmation that they're doing the right thing in the right way at the right time, because those are two different things.
Dr. Phil, you know the answer to that question, bro. Right? That's the reason why you asked it. You know the answer to that question. It's the latter, of course.
What we're asking for is basic respect. We're not going around and teasing other people, at least hopefully. And so we are really just asking for our genders to be respected, how we want to have autonomy over our own bodies respected, and not to disavow our own choices over our own bodies.
I'm sure you will agree that there are people that start the process for the wrong reasons in the wrong way.
Absolutely. And I mean, most places point between 1 and 2.5% of people detransition, and even smaller number of those have any regrets.
I doubt that. I doubt that's a real statistic. I'm pretty sure this person made that up.
It's also important to point out the number one reason for detransition is because transphobia. And so creating more and unnecessary...
No, they didn't regret cutting off their penis, right? They didn't regret going to these hormones, okay? They didn't regret going through all that stuff. No, it's transphobia, okay? Transphobia. Again, these people want you to believe that there's no detransitioner who could have actually regretted undergoing some of these treatments on their body, okay? The only way that they regret anything is because society told them to regret it. Amazing.
Boundaries for transitioning ultimately does harm our community.
What surprised you the most with the interviews you've done with medical professionals in particular?
I spent a lot of time looking at this, like 6 months and several months before I actually even jumped into this, because I was so scared of it. I remember reading on Twitter all these different sides. And only after I talked to some of these doctors who basically have been at the forefront of this, Dr. Laura Edwards Leeper, who we showed clips of throughout the show. She was the first clinical psychologist at the first pediatric gender clinic in America. And she has helped hundreds of children transition, many of them successfully. But she also says, look, the way in which we're going in this country right now, this whole thing has been hijacked, and we are not doing it correctly as a profession, as a field. And so I asked her, I said, well, how is that being received? And she said, I'm being vilified. My message, along with other doctors, they're discrediting me. I thought like that shouldn't be. This is a story. And after speaking to a bunch of people who've transitioned themselves, I spoke to one of her kids that she helped transition successfully. And he, like one of your guests, said, like, look, this was the right way to go about it. She helped me over time transition, and it saved my life. So I think there's a possibility that both are right, but there is a lot of information that is just patently wrong on the internet, and people are saying things that are wrong. And I think it's what I've taken away is that we should step aside and listen to the people like you're having on your show today, who actually have gone through this or who are working in this field, and everybody else is just chatter.
I suppose.
Yeah. So again, I don't know. I personally believe that again, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing that goes against the narrative is being suppressed because the people that study it, that have this information, they've been silenced. They've been saying, "Hey, you're transphobic. You're bigot, whatever." And therefore, they don't really, want to tell the truth, right? They're not incentivized to speak out against the mob. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.